I pulled into the driveway 11 days ahead of schedule. The project lead at the northern camp had called a shutdown after a gas line incident near Yellowknife. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to send the non-essential crews home while inspectors went through the site. 7 months up there, and I'd imagined this moment differently. Maybe my son running out in his socks before I'd even killed the engine. Maybe my wife standing in the doorway with that half-smile she did when she was pretending not to be relieved. Instead, the house on Riverside Crescent sat quiet under a February sky the color of old dishwater. The snowblower was still in the middle of the driveway, which meant someone had started clearing it and stopped. The front path hadn't been salted. I let myself in with my key. The house was warm, but the kind of warm that comes from a thermostat, not from people moving around in it. I called out. Nothing. I checked the kitchen first. The sink had 2 mugs in it and a half-empty pot of coffee on the counter, cold. I checked the living room. The TV was off. On the couch was my son's backpack, the green one with the broken zipper I'd been meaning to fix since September. His boots weren't by the door. My phone buzzed. My wife's name. I answered. "You're home early." Not a question. Her voice had a flatness to it I didn't recognize right away. A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough. "He's at the program. The one I told you about. I couldn't place it." Immediately. 7 months of satellite calls that dropped without warning. 12-hour shifts. Weeks where the days blurred together. But I had the feeling of something I should know and didn't. What program? "Brendan, honestly. I told you back in October. Renewal, a residential program for life skills, outdoor work, academic support. Pastor Gilles runs it. It's up near Haliburton." Her voice had taken on a practiced tone, like she'd said these sentences before. "Our son needed structure. He was falling behind in school, and the therapist said, 'I want the address. You can't just show up. There's a schedule. Parents visit on the 2nd Sunday of the month. He's my son and I've been gone 7 months. Give me the address.'" She read it out slowly, like she was deciding with each number whether to keep going. I was already moving toward the garage. The drive up to Haliburton County took just over 2 hours. The Trans-Canada to Barrie, then east on the 118, then north on roads that got progressively narrower and less maintained. I had the address in my phone's GPS, but signal cut out twice in the last 40 minutes. I went by the route number and the occasional road sign. The property sat at the end of a gravel lane, about 3 kilometers off the county road. There was a hand-painted sign at the turn. Renewal Path Youth Ministry, private property. The lane curved through bare-limbed birch trees. The main building was a converted lodge, 2 stories of timber and green metal roofing. Behind it, farther back than I expected, there were outbuildings. A barn, a greenhouse with frosted plastic panels, a long, low structure I couldn't identify. There were no children anywhere visible from the lane. I parked in front of the lodge and knocked. A woman in her 30s answered, wearing a fleece vest with the Renewal Path logo on it, a hand reaching toward a son. She smiled with all of her mouth and none of her eyes. "Are you here for the parent information session?" "I'm here for my son. We don't have unscheduled family visits. It disrupts the therapeutic rhythm of the program. Tell me where he is right now." She stepped back, hand going to a radio on her belt. That's when I heard it. Not voices exactly, the sound of shovels on frozen ground, coming from behind the main lodge. I walked around the building before she could stop me. Behind the lodge, past the barn, there was a field that must have been cleared from bush sometime in the last few years. The ground was broken and frozen, dark against the snow around its edges, and there were boys in it. 12 of them, maybe more. Ages ranging from maybe 9 to 15. They wore canvas work coats and rubber boots. They were digging trenches in ground that was half frozen, moving slowly, breaking through ice crust with the tips of their shovels before scooping. A man stood at the far edge with his arms crossed, watching. My son was near the middle of the group, 3rd from the left. I knew him by the way he stood, weight on his left foot the same way I do, shoulders angled the same way his grandfather did. He was 11 years old and he looked like he'd been out there for hours. His face was red from cold. His gloves were too thin for February. He hadn't seen the field. "Hey." The woman with the radio had caught up. "Sir, this is a structured work period. You cannot." "That's my son." He looked up. His expression did several things at once. Shock, relief, and then something else that cracked me open. He didn't run. He just stood there with his shovel and looked at me like he wasn't sure I was real. Like he'd stopped expecting me. "Dad? Hey, buddy." Then his face broke and he started crying. Not the way kids cry when they're hurt or want something. The kind of crying that's been stored up for a long time and has nowhere else to go. He dropped the shovel and walked toward me, and I covered the distance between us in about 3 steps. He was lighter than I remembered. When I got my arms around him, I could feel his shoulder blades through the canvas coat. "They said you knew," he said into my jacket. "They said you both agreed. They said you thought this was best for me and you didn't want to be bothered with a call until the program was done." "That's not true. None of that is true. They said you were disappointed in me." That I needed to be here because I kept letting you down. I held on to him and didn't say anything for a moment because my throat had closed and I didn't trust what would come out. The other boys had stopped digging. They were watching us the way kids watch something they want and aren't sure they're allowed to want. Some of them looked hopeful, a few just looked blank, like hope was a habit they'd given up. You need to leave the work area immediately. The man from the far edge of the field had walked over. He was broad-shouldered, early 50s, with the kind of calm that's really just controlled aggression. He had a clipboard. I don't know who you are, but this is private property and you're disrupting a therapeutic session. Therapeutic session. I looked at the frozen field, the thin gloves, the shovels. I'm taking my son. That's not your decision. He's enrolled in a residential program under a signed agreement. Removal by a non-custodial. Check whatever joint paperwork custody. His expression shifted slightly. Your wife has authority over educational and therapeutic placements. It's in your separation agreement. That hit me wrong because I wasn't separated. We weren't divorced. I'd been 7 months at a work camp in the Northwest Territories, and apparently that was enough for the word wife to mean something different than I thought. One of the other boys, small, maybe 9, with ears too big for his head, leaned his shovel against his hip and looked at me. Are you actually taking him? He whispered. I looked at the kid. What's your name, Eli? Is there someone coming for you, Eli? He shook his head once, small and certain. Something in my chest did something I don't have a clean word for. Come on, I said to my son. I kept my arm around him and we started walking back toward the lodge. The broad-shouldered man stepped in front of us. If you remove that child, I will call the OPP and report a kidnapping. You will be charged, your son will be returned here, and your custody arrangement will be reviewed. Is that what you want? I'm not a big man. I'm average height, average build, spend my working life in conditions that keep me functional. I'm not someone who leads with confrontation, but I'd been gone 7 months and my son had been told I was disappointed in him and didn't want to be bothered. Call them, I said. Call them right now. And while you're on the phone, I'll be calling them too, and I'll be telling them there are children digging frozen ground in February with inadequate gear, and no parents present. He didn't move. My son pressed closer to my side. I got my phone out and dialed my wife. She answered on the second ring. Did you sign some kind of extended custody document? Her voice changed, went smaller. It wasn't custody. It was a program enrollment agreement. Pastor Gilles said it just meant they had authority to make day-to-day decisions about his schedule while you were away and I was working. You signed something that gave them authority over his placement? He said it was standard. All the parents sign it. He said it was like a school consent form. He's been digging frozen ground since I got here. He's been told I don't want to hear from him. Silence. I didn't know that part. Her voice had gone very quiet. I didn't know any of that part. I'm taking him home. She didn't argue. The broad-shouldered man, whose name I later learned was Gilles' operations director, a man named Aldrich Fourier. I walked past more to block us. My son had stopped crying by then and had taken my hand, which he hadn't done in about 2 years, and I wasn't going to make a thing of it. In the parking lot, I put my son in the passenger seat. He was quiet, watching the lodge doors like he was waiting for someone to come through them. Are we actually leaving? Yes. Promise? I promise. I was pulling out of the lot when I saw the OP cruiser turn in. I stopped. A female officer got out, mid-30s, dark coat, the kind of expression that's been trained to reveal nothing on arrival. She held up a hand. Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. I did. I kept my voice level and told her everything in about 4 minutes. My son's name, my name, the work camp, the address my wife had given me, what I'd found when I arrived, my son's account of being told I didn't want contact. She looked at my son in the passenger seat. He looked back at her. Can you roll the window down? She asked him. He did. Are you hurt? He thought about it longer than a kid should have to think about that question. My hands are really cracked, he said, from the cold. And I haven't talked to my dad in 3 weeks because they said he asked not to be contacted. The officer looked at me, then at the lodge behind me. I'm going to need to see the facility, she said, but she was saying it toward the lodge door where Aldrich Fourier had appeared. Sir, I'll need to see where these children sleep. What happened over the next 5 hours brought 3 more OPP cruisers, a children's investigator, and eventually a call to the Ministry of Labor. The lodge had 17 boys enrolled. They slept 4 to a room on bunks with no personal belongings except what fit in a single designated drawer. The work schedule was 6 days a week, clearing land, digging drainage ditches, splitting firewood, cleaning outbuildings. The revenue, investigators later determined, came from selling firewood and cleared lot services to properties throughout the county, along with what the families paid in enrollment fees, upward of $300 to $400 per month. The parents had been told it was a residential therapy program. The intake paperwork had language about structured outdoor education and restorative labor practices. Most of them hadn't read past the first page. I sat in my truck with my son while investigators went through the lodge. He'd stopped shaking. He'd eaten half a granola bar from my glove box and was holding the wrapper. Dad. Yeah. What happens to Eli? I didn't answer right away. Outside, one of the cast workers was speaking with Aldrich Fourier, who had gone from hostile to quietly cooperative in the way that people do when they know which direction things are moving. Someone's coming for him, I said. That's what the people going through the building are making sure of. He's been there since September. My son turned the granola bar wrapper over in his hands. His mom thought he was at a school for kids who struggle with reading. She works nights. She sends him letters and they give him 1 page at the beginning of the month. I had to look out the windshield for a moment. A paramedic came by the truck and checked my son over. Mild frostbite precaution on 2 fingers, general underweight, a skin infection on his left forearm from an untreated scratch that had gone 4 or 5 days without cleaning. Nothing permanent, the paramedic said. But she said it the way medical people do when they mean nothing permanent this time. My wife arrived at the property around 6 p.m. She'd driven up from the city in what must have been record time. She looked like she hadn't stopped to put her coat on properly. She tried to come to the truck window, but my son turned his face away, and I watched something happen to her that I didn't have the capacity to feel sorry about, not then. I thought it was real, she said to me through the driver's window. He had a website. He had references. 3 mothers from our church had sent their kids, and they all said the boys came back more focused, more respectful. Did you talk to the boys? She didn't answer. Did you call the program between October and now? They said the phones were disruptive to the program, that it was better for adjustment if the boys. You signed a form saying I'd agreed to extended absence from contact. She pressed her hand over her mouth. I just signed what he put in front of me. He said it was standard. Pastor Luke Gilles was arrested at a property in Bancroft at 9:30 that night. He'd left the Haliburton site at some point during the afternoon, apparently aware of what was coming. He was calm when they brought him in, according to the officer who later testified at trial. He gave a statement about the social value of structured outdoor learning for troubled youth. He used the word transformation 11 times. He was charged with fraud, labor exploitation, unlawful confinement, and breach of trust. His operations director took a plea. 4 program staff members were charged with lesser offenses. My wife was not charged criminally, but Children's Aid conducted an assessment that took Wisland, a parenting coordinator I won't describe in flattering terms. She had known less than I'd feared and more than she'd admitted. In the language of the assessment, she had exercised insufficient diligence in verifying program conditions. What she actually had done was trust a man with a website and a reference from someone at church, and sign documents she hadn't read carefully enough, because she was working 3 12-hour shifts a week as an LPN and raising a kid alone and was desperate for something to work. It didn't make what happened right, but it made it make a specific kind of sense. Our son came home and slept for 14 hours. When he woke up, he wanted toast, just toast. I made it and sat with him, and we didn't talk about much. The first 2 weeks, he didn't want to go outside. The driveway needed clearing a few times that month, and I did it alone. He'd watch from the window, and that was enough. If I made him come with me, even just to the end of the walk, his hands would start shaking. He'd been playing hockey before this, a winter league house team, nothing serious, just Saturdays with kids from his school. He quit. Said he didn't feel like it. I didn't push. But about 6 weeks in, I came downstairs one morning and found him at the kitchen table with a piece of graph paper, drawing out something carefully. He had a ruler. He had colored pens. I looked over his shoulder and saw he was designing a floor plan. Bedrooms, a kitchen, a big room with rec written in careful capital letters. What is this, a house, he said. I used to design them at Renewal Path when we had rest time. In my head, because we weren't allowed paper. I'm just writing it down now. I sat down across from him and watched him draw walls. They wouldn't let you have paper? Not for drawing, just for the weekly reflection forms. He kept drawing. I let him. Therapy started in January, a child psychologist in Barrie who specialized in institutional trauma. My son would come out of sessions and not talk about them, but he started sleeping better. He went back to school in February, and the teacher said he'd get up and walk out of class sometimes without asking, just when he needed air, and she'd let him go. She told me that directly at the first parent meeting, and I could have hugged her. The trial was scheduled for the following autumn. I'd left the northern camp for good by then. Took a position with a civil engineering firm in Sudbury. Longer commute some weeks, but I slept in my own bed. Gilles got 18 years. His lawyer argued strenuously that the program was a misguided but genuine attempt at youth rehabilitation, and the judge told him, on record, that she found that framing an insult to the 17 boys who had spent months of their childhoods digging ditches and sleeping in bunk rooms with no contact from their families. Aldrich Fourier got 6 years. 2 of the program staff got 18 months each. The civil settlement the families received came to just over $4.2 million split 11 ways after legal fees. We were one of the 11. My wife and I are still married. I don't know how to explain that in a way that makes it simple, because it isn't. What I can say is that we both had failures that contributed to what happened. Mine was 7 months of absence that left a gap wide enough for someone like Gilles to walk through with a clipboard and a consent form, and hers was trusting the clipboard and not the gap. We went to counseling separately and then together. My son knows we're trying. I think that matters to him, even if he hasn't said it directly. Eli went home to his mother in Scarborough. She testified at the trial with a translator, because her English was her second language and she wanted to be precise. She described reading the program brochure and thinking it sounded like the French Catholic schools she'd heard about growing up, structured, serious, faith-based. She'd thought that sounded good for a boy who had trouble sitting still and reading in a noisy house. Gilles' lawyer did not do well with her on cross-examination. My son keeps in touch with Eli. They text. Sometimes they play games online. Last summer, Eli's mother drove him up from Scarborough and the two of them spent a weekend here. They went on the dock and didn't do much. Eli's mother drank tea with my wife in the kitchen, and at the end of the weekend, when they were leaving, Eli looked at my son and said same time next year, like it was already decided. My son, who had been quiet most of the weekend, grinned. A year after the trial, I was asked to speak at a community information session organized by a child protection nonprofit in Sudbury. I'm not a speaker. I wrote notes on an index card and lost the card on the way in. I said what I could from memory. What I told them was this: the programs that take children from their families for months at a time and restrict contact are not normal, no matter how they describe themselves. Normal programs want you to visit. Normal programs give your child a way to reach you. If a consent form requires you to waive contact, don't sign it. Call a lawyer or call Children's Aid or call anyone, but do not sign it. If someone tells you your child will thrive with less parental interference, that person is telling you something that should make you leave the room. And if something feels wrong, trust that. Even if you're tired, even if you want so badly for something to work that you'd sign anything to make it be true. I've said my son's name into a satellite phone for 7 months at a time, and had the call drop before we got through the weather and the school update and the part where we'd have said the real things. I know what it costs to be far away, and I know what it costs the people you leave behind. The version of events where I didn't come home early is one I've thought about. A pipe that held. A different decision about the shutdown. 2 more months in the north, my son digging frozen ground through March, and me calling a phone line that Gilles' staff would have told me was unavailable. I don't let myself sit with that version too long. What I know is that I came home 11 days early to a quiet house and a child who'd been told his father had written him off, and the most important thing I ever did in my adult life was drive 2 hours north on a February afternoon and walk around the back of a building. My son is 13 now. He's back in hockey, a different team, a different rink, Thursdays and Sundays. He's not the fastest kid on the ice, but he's got good instincts, and his coach says he reads the play early, sees where the puck is going before it gets there. He still designs floor plans sometimes. He's got a whole folder of them on his computer now. Last month he showed me one he'd drawn with actual architecture software he'd taught himself from YouTube. 5 bedrooms, a workshop in the back, a covered porch that wraps around 2 sides. Who's this house for? I asked. I like making them. It's a good house. There's a version with a bigger workshop, he said. In case you ever need space for your tools. I looked at the screen for a moment. Something in me went quietly and completely undone. Show me that version, I said. He pulled it up. He'd already built a place for me in it. He'd built it months ago without saying anything, just in case.